everyone. I'm Robin Hattersley, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Safety Magazine. Welcome to the show. Traditionally, mass emergency notifications have been one-way broadcast communications from campus administrators to students, faculty, clinicians, staff members, and parents. However, emergency notification technologies have evolved so they can now facilitate two-way communications where information can flow back and forth from the campus to its community. This enables an organization to provide specific instructions to smaller groups of people and for those groups to provide intelligence to the campus public safety department as the situation unfolds. In my interview with Omnilert CEO Dave Frazier, he talks about how campus emergency communication is evolving, why two-way communication is so important, the types of information two-way communication systems can capture, and more. So here's my interview with Dave from Omnilert. Enjoy the show. So Omnilert is known as a provider of emergency mass notification systems. How is that market evolving?
Well, it's interesting that we were one of the initiators of the emergency mass notification systems market, but yet we find that these days that's not really nearly enough. What has happened is the market's evolved from essentially being notification, which is one-way broadcast, into two-way communication, so you can interact with your users. There's also an emphasis these days on prevention so that you can actually avoid or try to mitigate any emergencies before it ever gets to the point where you need to communicate about it. And lastly, I'd say there's also a thrust towards management. Some of these emergencies can be quite complicated, and so to help give our customers the tools to manage that complexity. So that's how the market's evolved from one-way into two-way communications, prevention, and management.
So why is two-way communication so important?
Well, traditional ENSs, it's really a one-way broadcast, and the push towards two-way is really for two major reasons. The first is that during an emergency, different people in your user population find themselves in different situations. And so to best manage that population, it's useful to understand their individual needs. And so you can help them in the best way possible, give them the best instructions, for example. To do that, there's got to be a certain amount of interactivity with the user so that you can understand that. The second major reason is if you have an unfolding emergency, the actual people that are involved in that are a tremendously rich source of information about what's going on. And so being able to interact with them, not only to help them, but also to understand really what's happening inside the crisis. All of these are useful elements to help the response teams and the administrators do the best job they possibly can.
So does two-way communication present any challenges to the safety team?
Two-way can present an incredible challenge, particularly with what we call the small group, large user base problem. It's typical for most organizations to have a relatively small staff, or at least one that is completely dwarfed by the size of the employee or student or citizen base that they're trying to support. So as soon as you go from broadcast into allowing an element of interactivity, you run the risk of a flood of additional information or requests to be individually supported to come in, which can really undermine the response team. It's a tremendous tsunami of data and requests. On the flip side of that, if you allow interactivity and the users don't get the sort of individual response that it seems like they've been promised, then that can be tremendously frustrating or even dangerous for the user base. So ironically, even though two-way communications sounds great, if it's done in the wrong way, it can actually make the situation worse.
So how is Omnilert Engage different from existing two-way communication solutions?
Well, we've tried to bring about a capability that we call mass engagement. Traditionally, when you're trying to introduce two-way communication into your notification system, you drop from this sort of broadcast mode into allowing one-on-one communications. And that's really the source of that challenge, where the data can quickly become a flood, and the information that you receive can be unactionable. So what we have tried to do with our mass engagement is really to provide for automatic data gathering and structured communications, where the questions, the queries that you make to your user base end up allowing an automatic subdivision of the user base into different situations. That process can continue, that triage and subdividing can continue to any number of levels, so that you can subdivide your group into the particular situation that they face. And most important, it makes it easy for the administrators, for the response team, to directly target messaging towards each particular group, so that they get the richest information. On top of that, we also provide a dashboard so that it's very easy to keep track of a dynamic unfolding situation.
Now, I've heard you use the term mass engagement. What does mass engagement mean?
Mass engagement is really a term that we use to coin the fact that this is rich information, that it's no longer just a one-way dialogue or fairly bland information coming back. So it's by providing this different triage, these automated sortings, and allowing the easy targeting of users in their particular situation, we feel it deserves a term, engagement. The mass is really about us trying to manage this issue of the small team with large group problems. So to make it possible for a small response team to feel that they're really talking directly in the manner that is required to their constituents.
So what sort of information can you capture? Maybe like location?
Location is one of the things that we can capture. One of the key elements to getting a high quality location read from your user base is to not require the users to have a mobile application. Mobile application penetration in a community ends up being, fractional compared to what it would be. So our instant app technology allows 100% of the user base to be addressed. They actually get an app-like experience, but they're reached through technologies such as text messaging. But they get this rich interface where we can read the location. The location is always opt-in at that point in time. So it has this capability, means that we get a very high percentage of location. Beyond that, though, the important things are to be able to subdivide people into groups and get a dashboard where it's easy to see the number of users that are in each group, as well as to drill down to individually address each user should that need be present. So those are the types of rich informations that we can receive during an incident.
So what happens if respondents are late in answering some of your questions?
Well, obviously that happens a lot. We have this tricky balance of wanting to be able to provide a rich overview to the response team without waiting for a large number of responses. So Engage actually uses what we call a catch-up mechanic. So that means that users that come on later than others into the process will be posed the same questions as others. And as if you like, the dialogue tree, the sets of questions and answers that sort people into groups, as they actually respond to these, in fact, historic questions, they'll be led down the appropriate tree, which will give them the responses that they would have received if they'd been there in real time, actually receiving the information. So in that way, they come along late, but they're caught up with the correct response. The flip side is also true. that the response team's dashboard of who's in whichever category will automatically update as those late users, those catch-up users come online, provide their location and provide answers to their questions. So in that way, we hope that we give a complete picture as the situation unfolds.